Come back. This is our fourth session and our final session for the day. I'd like to invite the two speakers and our moderator. I would like to invite our speakers and moderator to be on stage. And to moderate the session, the fourth session for today, it is honored to have the Home Minister himself, Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Hishamuddin Tun Hussein on. Let us give a very warm welcome to our moderator and our speaker for the fourth session. And the theme for the fourth session is Between Moderation and Extremism, Challenges and Responses. Before we begin the session, I'd like to remind once again, because there has been a slight lack of information with regards to the venue for our dinner tonight. Our dinner tonight will be graced by the presence of Tun Dr. Mahathir himself. And the venue for tonight's event is going to be at Mandarin Oriental. It's not here, but at Mandarin Oriental, Level 1 Ballroom. So it's going to be a dinner talk by Tun Dr. Mahathir. And it's going to be on at 8 p.m. tonight. Please make sure that all delegates bring along your participant tags. And it is our honor to have Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Hishamuddin himself to be here, our Home Minister, to steer the discussion. And the topic once again is Between Moderation and Extremism, Challenges and Responses. And I hope that we can finish the session by the latest by 6 p.m. inshallah. Thank you very much. I hand the session 6. Yeah, I hand over the session to Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri. Another round of applause to our speakers and moderator.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We live in troubling times right now, and globalization and its borderless global village makes it even more complex and complicated. And as Minister of Home responsible for the security, what is being deliberated in this conference is of much interest to us in the ministry, especially this session, session 4, entitled Between Moderation and Extremism, Challenges and Responses. I say this, ladies and gentlemen, because we live in a world where matters which in the past have been accepted for many, many years can very easily become contested territory today. Communal, religious conflicts and tensions are re-expressed in arguments about social, religious contracts, rights, and freedoms. And unfortunately, for the Minister of Home Affairs, it is very important to balance between those sometimes conflicting interests. And in that sense, the challenges and responses and ideas that comes from this conference, like I said, is very important for the ministry and I. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker, Yang Berhormat Nasharuddin Mat Issa, who I hope will give us some ideas on what are the challenges we might have to identify, and maybe we can then discuss the responses, because in this present transition and having to lead in times of change, it is very important that we get it right the first time around. For your information, Yang Berhormat Nasharuddin Mat Issa is currently the Member of Parliament in the constituency of Bachok, Kelantan, the former Deputy President of PAS, Pan-Malaysian Islamic Party. He was born in Negeri Sembilan. He studied graphic design in UiTM, University Technology Mara, pursued Islamic studies at Darul Uloom College, India, before he went to Jordan to study Arabic. He continued in his studies, especially in Sharia law in the Faculty of Sharia Jordan, and was subsequently appointed as an assistant lecturer at the International Islamic University. Then he went on to the University of Glasgow and continued with his master's in IIUM, specializing and focus on comparative law. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in giving a big hand to our first speaker, Yang Berhormat Nasruddin Maisa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man walahu wa ba'd. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Well, in this afternoon of session 4, hopefully it's not going to be a sleepy one after that good lunch that we had, so as to share our experience and compare notes among participants of this seminar towards supporting a movement of moderates, I shall expose briefly my perspective on two aspects. One, the challenges of modern extremism to mankind. And number two, the concept of Islamic al-wasatiyah for peace solution. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, let us be very clear on one single point. That is, extremism exists within all sectors of life, and such psychotic behavioral nature could be further enhanced or more distinct among practitioners of cults and religions of the world. We are saying that extremists do exist among Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus and Buddhists, and others, and they are spread all over the world, waiting just for the correct time to strike. Admittedly, September 11 managed to change the world's perspective towards Islam, the Muslim world and the whole world by itself in general. Needless to say, much of the negative attitudes displayed throughout the world today towards Islam stems from an inability or failure to understand the basic fundamentals of Islam, has understood from its original sources, i.e. the Quran and Hadith of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The last Abrahamic religion and its followers has been portrayed as retrogressive, patriarchal, anti-modern, and the latest as extremist, in nature which coherent with the old dictum created by the anti-Islam groups that Islam spreads through the sword. In short, all the shortcomings of the past centuries are heaped on Islam and its adherents. It is within this context that Islamic scholars like Professor Najib al-Attas had proclaimed that, and I quote, "The greatest challenge that has surreptitiously arisen in our age is the challenge of knowledge. Indeed, not as against ignorance, but as knowledge has conceived and disseminated throughout the world by Western civilization. Knowledge whose nature has become problematic because it has lost its true purpose due to being unjustly conceived and has thus brought chaos in man's life instead of and rather than peace and justice." Ladies and gentlemen, in the relation between Islam and the West, it is to be stressed that Islam is not an enemy to the West, and the West must never look to Islam as its enemy. To do so would cause great harm to either party, as the aftermath of the September 11 had proved to the world. One of the ruins we can only hope to rebuild with stronger foundations and avoid making the same mistakes. An alternative view is that human beings make selective use of the past in order to understand and to justify aspects of the present, and that the past is continually being redefined, even reinvented. According to this view, both Muslims and non-Muslims choose to remember the past, or more accurately, choose stories from the past to illustrate feelings, fears, and animosities in the present. Either way, the task of combating Islamophobia involves a repudiation of the power which stories about the past in general and about the Crusades in particular do certainly have. Ladies and gentlemen, another aspect of unfair treatment toward Islam is the sweeping generalizations of certain things which are Muslim, where such generalizations are not leveled against non-Muslims. A very good example would be Irish territories. Irish territories bombers are not called Christian fundamentalists as opposed to Muslim fundamentalists. Westerners choose to ignore the fact that the term fundamentalism is a term coined by Christians to describe themselves as serious adherents to the principal tenets of Christianity. Human rights and democratic principles are non-existent in Islamic countries as opposed to Western countries. Islamic rulers are deemed to be ignorant with regard to rights of citizens. Such accusers fail to note the contribution of Muslim authors to studies of statecraft as espoused by Al-Mawardi in his magnum opus Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyah, and this misconception is again a challenge that we Muslims must face and triumph over. Few of the challenges mentioned, I'll try to promote again and reiterate what has been mentioned earlier in the speech by the Prime Minister and also speeches that have, earlier speeches on the principles and basic tenets of al-Wasatiyah. We view the next millennium as a challenge for Muslims to propose its doctrine as a solution to social justice, true practice of modern democracy, advancement for peace, sustainable development, and a new world order. Since Asia, particularly East Asia, is religiocentric in nature, and that the religious influences are still intact, Islam could be seen as a very strong cohesive power within the region. And I agree very much with what that was mentioned by Professor Tan Sri Kamal Hassan earlier in the morning, that concentration of the development of Islam in Southeast Asia should be given a certain priority in studies in the academic world, at least. Let us not forget the fact that when the Romans conquered Palestine, the Jews were expelled, reducing them to Jewish diaspora. Nevertheless, when Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, the second Muslim caliph, conquered Palestine, the Christians and Jews were protected. Freedom, justice, peace, and equality have always been the virtues of every state. Through the process of democracy, leaders of nations of the world try to pursue various strategies and overcome thousands of hurdles in the hope of attaining political stability, economic prosperity, and harmonious social stature. Since Aristotle, the term state and politics have been redefined by many social scientists to find the most appropriate and conducive means of life. But alas, the world politics was and always been unstable. People of the world seems to forget their own roots, from where life begins, and why are mankind created in this worldly life. To a Muslim, the answer has been clearly written in the Holy Quran more than 1,400 years ago. The only way to understand oneself will be one world and one God. The Islamic moderate position of al-Wasatiyah is a middle position between religious conservatism and extremism. The Quranic concept of al-Wasatiyah, or in the context of the Quran, mentioned as ummatan wasata, a middle nation, tells the Muslims to be worthy of being heir to ancient and universal truths and to principles of social and human stability, often betrayed but never forgotten, of which our chaotic world has a desperate need, a nation which witness to a hope that transcends the dead ends against which the contemporary world is battering itself to death. Islam's notion of ummatan wasata, the middle nation, within the context of khayra ummah, that is the best nation, emphasizes on moderation, offers firm foundations to promote interhuman cooperation. The betterment and development of the Muslim world in the age of globalization and religious pluralism lies in adopting and practicing the Quranic concept and Prophet Muhammad's practice of al-wasatiyah as a model of life. History has shown that Islam built a continuous high civilization across the vast regions, cultures and peoples of the world which endured for a long period of time its strength to lay in the message from God revealed to the last prophet and the practice of al-wasatiyah. Moderation by him and the subsequent generations, when Christian scholars flocked into Spain to learn about Islamic theories of government and sciences, Muslim universities did not close their doors on the Christian scholars. If the West and Islam are to be reconciled, the return to basic tenets of mutual respect and scholarship need to be engendered and encouraged. This is a wishful thinking, but must be positively aimed for. Islamic civilization started to flounder with the abandoning of the principle of al-wasatiyah in all dimensions of life, from religious practice to education, etc. It is time to revive wasatiyah again. And I congratulate this on the effort announced by the Prime Minister earlier this morning about the establishment of the Al-Wasatiyah Institute under the Prime Minister's Department. Wasatiyah does not mean compromise. It means confidence. It means right balancing to bring justice to its place. The challenges of development before the Muslim today cannot be answered only politically. They need an all-rounded approach in all spheres of humanity. When we propose Islam to be the cohesive power among nations of the world, we do not mean to ignore their religions and great traditions of the East. Even if Islam rule, non-Muslim will always be protected under the Sharia. History has proven the case where Muslims have shown utmost tolerance and diplomacy. Let us not forget that when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ signed the Hudaybiyah Treaty with the non-Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ did compromise up to the extent of agreeing not to write his name as Muhammad Rasulullah, but Muhammad bin Abdullah. As again, the strong protest coming from the Sahaba or the companions of the Prophet, but to the Prophet ﷺ, the object of getting the treaty agreed and signed by the non-Muslim was far more important than discussing details that could have ended up with disagreement and to fall back to square one. We learn from here how Islam interacts with non-Muslims with great concern. As long as the non-Muslim obey the Sharia fully and support the dawla or the state, and the Muslim leader has the imam. There is no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that Islam has been the most misunderstood religion in the world, partly because of us, the Muslim. Partly due to the behaviors akhlaq of the Muslim themselves for not being able to be exemplary to the non-Muslims. Likewise, Muslim nations are often at war with one another, but at the same time could be more than brotherly with other non-Muslim states. This situation has brought the Islamic world to congregate and rethink about their future and destiny. The Middle East problem resulted in Israel's existence since 1948, and the Palestinians were left without a state. And Masjid al-Aqsa was robbed from the Muslim world. We sincerely think that it's time for Muslims to prove to the world, as they did during the dark ages of Europe, that Muslims would be able to rule with justice and maintain peace to the world order. The non-Muslim must not be afraid of the Muslims or the Sharia. What the Muslim world has lost today is the confidence of the non-Muslim in Islam due to the failure of Muslims to profess their faith as in accordance to the Holy Al-Quran. That's why we propose the slogan, going back to the Quran is most appropriate for the Muslims of today. Great Muslim civilization were once gurus of the West in terms of sciences, philosophy, architecture, and many other fields of knowledge, knowledge triumphant, borrowing the terms of Franz Rosenthal. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly, in this time of difficulties, we as members of the Muslim Ummah should close ranks under the banner of Islam as taught by the Prophet ﷺ and has exemplified by the lives of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in. We should spread the message that Islam is a religion of peace, and to be extremely Muslim is a state of being where a person is totally committed to all the commandments and prohibitions of Allah. To be extremely Muslim, or to be fundamentally a Muslim, is a far cry from to be an extremist or fundamentalist. An extremist or a fundamentalist is a person who only chooses certain aspects of Islam and discards the rest of Islam, has a total way of life. In turn, he then distorts such aspects of Islam that he has selected by using hate to propagate his agenda and declaration, his action to be Islamic. What the Islamic world should strive for is a better understanding of Islam by Muslims, and thereafter to propagate the faith to others as a totally comprehensive religion and contemporary in nature. Only then will humanity be freed from the shackles of ignorance, greed, and rapacity. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Ya Muhammad. Suffice for me to just say that for food for thought, what was presented to us just now, the challenge of knowledge, the challenge of characterization and Islamophobia, and how we move forward under the principle and practice of al-wasatiyah. And we start by looking at ourselves first. And I think that's a great start in looking at it. And I believe our next speaker, Ambassador Hajime Ogawa, will be looking at it on a more broader aspect in the context of peace and how that relates to the world at large. Ambassador Hajime Ogawa was born in 1939. He was a former parliamentary vice president of Foreign Affairs, Japan. Prior to joining the civil service, he was the director of Mitsubishi Brazil. He is a leading expert on issues relating to South America. And he is currently the chairman of Kyowa Foundation, a policy planning foundation, and is also a member of the Policy Planning Committee of the Japan Forum on International Relations, Inc. And on that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Hajime Ogawa.
Your Excellency, Minister of Home and moderator, members of the Conference of the Global Movement of Moderation, it is my great honor and pleasure to be able to speak about the Japanese experience towards the peace. Japan has more than 65 years of sustained peace, and I feel it has made efforts to contribute to the world peace. Well, before starting, I'd like to apologize that some of my points of speech are duplicated with what Mr. Watanabe spoke at the previous session. Well, the second speaker always has some disadvantage. First of all, I want to speak about Japan's recent history to show that the present peace and moderation in Japan was not achieved so easily. After having enjoyed 250 years of peace from the beginning of 17th century, well, it was not ruled by democracy, of course, Japan entered upon a period of excessiveness, which essentially lasted for 100 years. The change in government so the influences of the military become ever stronger until finally it practically ruled Japan. During these years, Japan was involved in 4 wars. The first war was with China, in great measure over control of Korea. The second war was between the Russians. The Japan Third War, the second China-Japanese War, led to the Japan's final war during this expansionist period. This next war, of course, is the World War II, and did not end until Japan surrenders to the Americans in 1945. By the end of the World War II, it was clear that we paid too high a price for war. During this last war, all totaled, Japan suffered 3,200,000 died. Of the dead were 2,400,000 soldiers and 800,000 civilians. The 2 atomic bombs killed around 200,000 people in Hiroshima and in Nagasaki. When the war ended in 1945, Japan lost almost everything. It lost all its infrastructures, transportation facilities, and also found its farmland in ruin. Japan became one of the poorest countries in the world. At the initial stage of the post-war period, we had many seditions, mainly from extreme left side. But in the end, the Japanese people did not accept this radicalism and supported a moderate development. From the early stage of Japan's post-war development, a center-right party had ruled the parliament for 60 years. This political stability no doubt contributed to Japan becoming one of the richest countries in the world after being one of the poorest nations in 1945. There is no doubt that because of the horrible experience of the war, the people preferred a moderate and stable regime. But it should be noted that other important elements played an important part in sustaining the peace. The government attempted to put fairness in all its policies, and this can be seen still today in Japanese society. Japan's people enjoy the greatest income equality of any other nation. A recent public poll shows that even today, 80% of Japanese think that they are a middle class. Japan's prosperity springs from its stability and peace, and in order to have an enduring peace, the nation must be fair. Through the eyes of Japanese experience, in order to achieve peace and political stability under the democracy, it is essential that the government have social, economic, and corporate fairness. I believe that the fairness in government can lead the people to an enduring and just peace. Well, now I am going to speak the importance of Japanese cooperation with other nations and then about our efforts to rebuild the aftermath of the disaster. Peace can be disrupted by natural disaster as well as human action. From 1945, Japan implemented a program that would provide assistance to underdeveloped countries, mainly to Asian countries. Initially, the government set a rule that the assistance was to be strictly limited to the area of public welfare. I should mention that the Japanese government assistance has also been furnished through various international organizations, mainly those integral to the United Nations. Started more recently, non-government organizations are another important way for Japan has tried to offer assistance to overseas countries. In 2010, Chile was hit by a tremendous earthquake and tsunami. The Japanese civil contribution to Chile was largest in the world. Japan's assistance will be an important step towards the stability of public order, which is an important step towards peace. Well, I'd like to speak about our earthquake and the Fukushima accident. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to all the nations of the world for their great assistance to Japan after the earthquake and tsunami last year. The Japanese people will never forget the kindness and support offered to us from both nations and individuals from so many parts of the world. On March 11, 2011, I was in Tokyo at a coffee shop chatting with my friends. Suddenly, the ground and buildings began to shake. Regrettably, I had to abandon my coffee and run out into the street with everyone else. The trembling was so strong that I could scarcely stand. I tried to phone to my house, but in vain, as I recognized that the mobile phone system was not functioning during the emergency. I was very lucky I could return to home safely, but in my house, my wife was waiting for me, shuddering. The problem in Tokyo was that almost 1 million people filled the streets and walkways in order to return home. This earthquake and tsunami that devastated the Tohoku area killed more than 20,000 people and left another 500,000 as refugees when their homes were swept away along with their towns and farms. Compounding the disaster was the accident of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, where another 90,000 people were obliged to abandon their homes. After these disasters, most Japanese were stunned and could not think of what to do. However, many of our overseas international friends, including of course, Malaysian people, assisted us in our time of need. This immediate support was a great help for us. Also, Japanese people reminded of the importance of its communal ties started uniting in order to help those suffering from their terrible event. Tens of thousands of volunteers quickly went to work to aid the refugees, and to this day they continue to assist refugees still in need. By the way, the January 10th was the Coming of Age Day in Japan. I was impressed and heartened to hear that many 20-year-olds are determined to take a part in the recovery of their country after experiencing or watching the tsunami disaster. Japan gained young people's awareness concerning responsibility. I believe that peace in Japan will be maintained as long as these young people hold on to their hope. We also recognize the importance of peace at this time. We are reminded that peace is also threatened by natural disasters. Well, as a conclusion, it is easy to speak of peace in words. However, to actually realize peace is extremely difficult. Unfortunately, wars rage on every day in the world, and thousands of people die due to the failure of peoples to resolve disputes. I believe, judging from Japanese past experience, to achieve peace, there needs to be unity between nations and within each nation. The rest of the world should cooperate and unite to persuade nations to resolve and settle disputes through peaceful manner. It's important to search for realistic solutions during this process through negotiation. Within this idea, politicians, not anyone else, should take initiative. Sometimes this means de-emphasizing an individual's ideals while trying to find a common ground among varied positions. We, as Asian people, are culturally equipped to this, I believe. If all superpowers could act for the sake of the world's common interest, the world could cultivate the ground for lasting peace. Radicalism will not rise up with followers when the people believe that they have a just peace. Finally, Japan has not been an active player in settling the international disputes. Although Japan is not a military superpower, I believe Japan is capable of acting as a fair arbiter between nations. I see Japan as benefiting international relations if it takes a broader and more active role in mediating international disputes. Thank you.
Thank you, Hajime Ogawa-san. Thank you very much. Thank you for reminding us what Japan had to pay for, the cost that Japan had to pay for peace. And as they moved forward after the war, lessons learned, fairness, income, equality, cooperation, unity, and how politicians got to find common ground, looking at the bigger picture, and most importantly, patience. So as we embark on this journey, ladies and gentlemen, those are very important points that have been raised, and we have to always remember that it's never going to be easy. We are now, we have about a bit more than 10 minutes for questions and answers, right? I won't go on any longer, so I'll leave it open to the floor. Marina?
Thank you. In talking about extremism, we seem to be focusing only on international extremism, but I think we should note that sometimes not only do we have domestic extremism, but it's not always directed at the other, meaning people of other faith or other races. Sometimes it is also directed inwards towards people of your own. So I would be interested in comments about, for instance, ethno-nationalist groups or racial supremacist groups who not only target the other, but sometimes their own people who do not agree with them. And how is it that governments that call themselves moderates do nothing about such hate groups and hate speech, and instead direct their ire towards the victims of these groups?
Very conveniently, what Bin Nasruddin said, just for me to answer. Like I said, we are a society in transition. And as we go through change, it is very important for us to be able to feel, as a responsible government, the ability for us to be intact. And for better or for worse, we have managed, well, I have for the last 2 years, in respect of the Ministry of Home Affairs anyway, managed it in a way that we have not seen blood in the streets. We have not seen riots go out of hand. We do give space for us to get used to the transition. But I believe, as what Haji Meogawa said, it will take time. It requires patience. It requires a lot of courage. And at the end of the day, if the intention is to do what is right, and people, we do not have to pay the costs that Japan had to go through or other countries have to go through, I think that is something well worth the thought and the effort. Gentleman in front.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Dr. Muhammad Burhan. My question goes to the first speaker. I think we talk about the challenges and responses. Do you see that some of the extremism is coming from thinking from the beginning? They have to talk about it and then make some conceptualization of this extremism. What we are seeing now, from that end, the security measures of the country will come in and start applying the security measures on this kind of people. Don't you see that we have to create some kind of counter-argument first before we use security measures? Because at the end of the day, if we take this guy from his platform and we put him into the jail, he will get more supporters than if we leave him and the other guys counter-argue from thinking perspective. I think my question is clear. Thanks.
Again, that question would be better answered by the Home Minister himself, because I'm not in charge of security. But I think I would like to call back what has been mentioned earlier in the morning about the Arab Spring and you know, what's happening in the Middle East. And quite many are trying to compare the development there with what might be happening here in Malaysia. Well, I've got my own personal view about the whole thing. I don't think that you know, kind of Arab Spring that started in Tunisia, followed in Egypt and so on, you know, that kind of demography, that kind of situation, that kind of uneasiness will happen here. Because from the political perspective, one of the problems that we have in Malaysia, this is my own personal view here, is the complacency of, you know, the general standard of living that we have here in this country that makes people, yes, they want to do change, yes, there are, you know, call for changes here and there, but not to the extent that has been experienced in the Middle East as far as the last 1 year development is concerned. So to contain, yes, I agree, the need to contain, you know, the uprising of feelings and changes. But again, it is something that comes from people that we can't do anything much about it. Allah.
May I ask a question?
Thank you.
I have the mic here. Sir, here. Sini.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Syed Akbar. Question for YB Nasruddin. Thank you for coming. Very brave of you. You mentioned about, you know, people dwelling on the past and people having selective memory, selectively choosing from history to maintain present animosities. Yeah. So I would like your views on the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias. What is your view? Because this conflict also continues in our country. Another quick question. You spoke about akhlaq, and you said that there are Muslim countries who go to war with other Muslim countries. At the same time, they maintain friendship with non-Muslim countries. Your party, PAS, has a very it's a very strong animosity between PAS and for UMNO, which is also a party which is almost all the members are Muslims. At the same time, you can cooperate very closely with non-Islamic parties. That seems to fall into the description which you just made. So can you please can we have your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Thank you. For the first question on Sunni and Shia, I raised the question in the parliament. Why is it that, why must those who profess this mazhab Shia in Malaysia, should they be detained, they are to be detained under the ISA? Bit difference here. The question was answered. No, they were not detained under that, but my question was that, is it just because of the differences that we have in the mazhab, we put them in a position? I have my own personal view about the Shia, of course, being a Sunni myself, but I think in as far as respecting, the belief, in as far as respecting the practices of that particular group, I think extreme measures should not be taken, especially in the context of the Malaysian landscape, because it is something that need to be educated. The people need to be educated, the people need to know what the differences is really all about. As far as the second question is concerned, you said I'm very brave to come here today to this seminar. I'm not representing my organization for this seminar. I believe in the need for dialogues. I believe in the need for everybody to participate for a good cause. And I think promoting and this initiative of the global movement of moderates, to bring together different thoughts and ideas. I was very happy today in the morning. One of the questions was raised by our brother, our Sikh brother. I think he's still around maybe. He stood up and raised an issue. And I could see even during the lunchtime just now, the participants, not just Muslim, though my stress in my speech was more on Islam and Muslims, but this kind of participants that, covers the whole spectrum of the Malaysian social background is something that needs to be supported. Well, if you were to talk about the partisan politics, I've tried to make an effort to try to bring close differences between the two political organizations, but as you might have been following, that it is still something that needs to be put an effort on, because I think still we are very much kind of a well, the public just can't understand as yet what do at least a small group in my organization is concerned about the need to talk, the need to discuss. It's not about merging, it's not about joining, it's not about crossing over, but the need to talk between not just PAS and UMNO, it is PAS and also all the other organizations. That is the reason why when I came out with about 6 years ago, this two terminology in my organization for the organization is very much in need to be engaged, to engage with people, and so to repackage herself. And I think that process has been ongoing, and I hope that this process is going to continue in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Right at the back there.
Hello, thank you.
Hi.
My name is Duke Veldhuis, and I've come from the United Kingdom today. I was very pleased to hear about this session. I think everybody's beginning to raise some issues that go unspoken because, with fantastic credit to Malaysia, of course there's a lot of moderation here as well, especially with regard to religion. But I suspect there are problems here like there are everywhere else. There's been a lot of focus on Islam, but I wonder whether the question is not what is it, to be Islamic, what is it to be Christian, what is it to be Jewish, but what is it to be human? Because there's been slaughter throughout the ages across the world in the name of religion. And one thing that we are doing here is opening up discussion, but of course what we need is not ultimately discourse, that is a start, but we need is education. So one thing that I would propose, and I would like, since we have His Excellency from Japan here and people from Malaysia, one thing, for example, that I can think of as a practical action would be education. And then I do not mean at university level, I mean in the schools from a very young age, educating children on the different religions. When push comes to How realistic do you think in Japan, in Malaysia, it would be to sit down and have teachers equally, without bias, educating young people on the differences and similarities between religions as perhaps a starting point for more moderate thinking?
Thank you. I think maybe Ogawa-san would like to reply to that, because in Japan, we were talking earlier, religion doesn't factor into... Would you like to comment on that?
Well, in Japan, of course, most of the people believe in some religion. But generally, we admit that the other people, for example, my intimate friend believe in the other religion, we accept. So in Japan, well, between the priest or the high-class religious people, there might be some dispute or argument, but in the common level, we have no conflict about the religion in Japan. So Japanese government or the Japanese administration in principle do not concern about the religion program, but they are quite neutral.
On the suggestion to look at education as the way forward, I believe that Professor Kamal in the first session this morning talked at length on it, so maybe we could refer to that. It's always been education, the key. One last question. Sir?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Momodu Musa Juf. I'm from Takaful Gambia Limited, West Africa. The Gambia is a small country, about 2 million in population, 95% Muslim, but relatively very peacefully living together. We don't have problem of ethnicity and religion. I think I would want to support our sister from Britain's proposal. That is to say, the extremists that are already within our society will be very difficult to change. They have a mindset on what actually they believe. But going all the way, education, engaging the young ones so that the trend doesn't continue. We have to stop it somewhere. Stopping it somewhere means starting from the new generation to come. So that the ones that have already been there, it would be very difficult. It will be more expensive to get their mindset changed. But at least if we go all out to see that, I mean, there is a special treatment for the young that are to come. So one of the participants this morning said the philosophy should be do unto people what you would like them to do unto you. If that is the slogan, maybe with generations to come, then religion will be a matter of one's individuals' belief. But just humanitarianism is what we need to promote. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. That was really not a question for us to answer. It was a suggestion which I think there's no argument on the stage on the matter. But how do we move forward? So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for me to draw session 4 to a close. I wish you all the very best and join me in giving a great applause to our two speakers before I pass this on back to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhammad Datuk Sri Syamuddin Tun Sin On, and another round of applause for each and every one of us who are here, glued to your chair. Despite the fact it's already 6 p.m., I can see that we are very glad to see more hands being raised, looking for opportunities to ask questions. It shows the level of commitment, excitement, but save your energy for tonight. Once again, I'd like to remind our date with Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad at 8 p.m. is not going to be here. It's at Mandarin Oriental Ballroom, Level 1, and also a number of announcements to be made. Our session tomorrow is will be will commence by having our town hall session number 1. It's going to be, we will begin our tomorrow session at 9:15 a.m. And there is a slight of change in the number of speakers. Instead of 2, we'll be having only 1. Professor Emeritus Dr. W. Scott Thompson is the only speaker for the town hall session, whereby Admiral Dennis C. Blair will be shifted to luncheon address on Thursday. So I hope to see you tonight during the dinner. And thank you once again. Another round of applause to our moderator and speakers for the 4th session. Assalamu alaikum and have a good rest.